Friends, we already discussed about the principles of integrated water resource management. The four principles which were drawn in the International Conference in Dublin in 1992 are: water is a finite and vulnerable resource. Second principle is water management should be based on participatory approach involving users, policymakers, and planners. And the third principle is women play an important role in the management of water. And the principle number 4 is water is to be viewed as a social good as well as an economic good. So today we will discuss how to implement the IWRM, or what are the frameworks required for implementation of IWRM. So although being practically adopted worldwide, IWRM is still a major research topic in water science, and its implementation is a great challenge for many countries. So IWRM is still young in its growth. Global water consensus is in the sense that governments have to put their signatures under outcomes of Dublin and Rio conferences and are participating in the follow-up processes of implementing these agreements. So, under global water consensus, the countries have signed for a common approach, and now they are following up the process of implementing these agreements. The globalization of freshwater management is marked by the emergence of a range of new global water institutions, including Global Water Partnership and World Water Council. So there are organizations like Global Water Partnership and World Water Council have been established to implement the IWRM. It has been argued by different people that the so-called global consensus is a collection of several and not necessarily internally inconsistent ideas. So even though the global conference has signed a consensus of different ideas which may not be internally consistent, but they have been adopted as a consensus ideas. Integrated water resource. So these ideas are integrated water resource management in association with river basin management. Second one, participation and stakeholders involvement. Third is privatization and liberalization. These three components are three sets of ideas, each with a different history and supporting coalition. They have been brought under a single roof by writing them into consensus global water policy documents. So these three ideas have been brought under a single roof and are accepted, or they are the consensus ideas. The problem for most countries is the long history of sectoral development. As the Global Water Partnership puts it, as IWRM is a challenge to conventional practices, attitudes, and professional certainties. It confronts entrenched sectoral interests and requires that water resources managed holistically for the benefit of all. So far we are all adapted a sectorial development or sectoral approach. That is why the IWRM confronts the entrenched sectoral interests and requires that water resources managed holistically. So in the IWRM we are supposed to manage it holistically. No one pretends that meeting the IWR challenge will be easy, but it is vital that a start is made now to avoid burgeoning crisis. So to avoid the rapidly increasing crisis, a start has been made towards IWRM, even though it is challenging. IWRM is above all a philosophy. As such, it offers a guiding conceptual framework with a goal of sustainable management and development of water resources. What it does remind is that people try to change their working practices to look at the bigger picture that surrounds their actions and to realize that these do not occur independently of the actions of others. It also seeks to introduce an element of decentralized democracy into how water is managed with its emphasis on stakeholders' participation and decision making at the lowest appropriate level. So IWRM demands the participation and looks at a bigger picture that surrounds the action and realize that these do not occur independently. So the actions do not occur independently and they are dependent actions of the others. So it seeks to introduce an element of decentralized democracy. So the democracy, the decentralized, it needs a decentralized democracy. That means a bottom-up approach is required. All of this implies change which brings threats as well as opportunities. There are threats to people's power, position, and threats to their sense of themselves as professionals. So, this change brings some threats to the position and powers of some group of people and some professionals. So, it is a challenge job to implement the IWRM. IWRM requires that platforms be developed to allow very different stakeholders, often with apparently irreconcilable differences, to somehow work together. So you have to bring all the stakeholders with different ideas. Sometimes they are irreconcilable. You cannot reconcile the differences, but somehow you have to bring them under them a single roof, that is IWRM. Because of the existing institutional and legislative frameworks, implementing IWRM is likely to require reforms at all stages in the water planning and management cycle. So IWRM needs a change in the existing legal framework as well as the institutional frameworks. An overall plan is required to envisage how the transformation can be achieved, and this is likely to begin with a new water policy to reflect the principles of sustainable management of water resources. So we need to have a water policy which reflects the principles of sustainable management under IWRM. To put the policy into practice is likely to require the reform of water law and water institutions. So this can be a long process, needs to involve extensive consultations with affected agencies and the public. So implementation of IWRM needs reforms in water law as well as water institutions, and it will take some time to bring the changes. Implementation of IWRM is best done in a step-by-step process, with some changes taking place immediately and others requiring several years of planning and capacity. So it can be implemented step by step, and some changes can be brought immediately and some changes may need years together with planning and capacity building. Policy and legal framework. Attitudes are changing as officials are becoming more aware of the need to manage resource efficiently. Already the government and officials are becoming more aware for the need of IWRM. Even the government of Karnataka has already established an institution called Advanced Center for IWRM with different interdisciplinary staff in that to implement the IWRM, and it has got a vision and mission statement, and it acts as a thing for the water resource department of government of Karnataka. They see too that construction of new infrastructure has to take into account environmental and social impacts and fundamental need for systems to be economically viable for maintenance purpose. So now if you want to take up the construction of new infrastructure, so we have to take into account the environmental and social impacts and also see that they are viable for maintenance purposes also. However, they may still be inhibited by political implications of such a change. The process of revising water policy is therefore a key step requiring extensive consultation and demanding political commitment. So when If we try to change the existing system, there may be some inhibition by the political implications, and we need and the IWRM demands a political commitment for the implementation of the IWRM. Water legislation converts policy into law and should clarify the entitlement and responsibilities of users and water providers. So, when you frame some policies and laws, so they should clarify the entitlement and responsibilities of the users and water providers, clarify the roles of state in relations to their stakeholders, formalize the transfer of water allocations, provide legal status for water management institutions of government and water user groups, ensure sustainable use of resources. So the laws and policies which are to be framed should include these points. Bringing some of the principles of IWRM into a water sector policy and achieving political support will be challenging as hard decisions have to be made. So, if we want to frame and implement the IWRM, then we need to take some hard decisions, and we may need the political support for this purpose. It is therefore not supporting it is therefore not surprising that often major legal and institutional reforms are only stimulated when serious water management problems have been experienced. So only when the seriousness of the water problem arises, then it is that we go for changes both institutional and legal framework. Institutional framework. For many reasons, developing country governments consider water resource planning and management to be a central part of a government responsibility. This view is consistent with the international consensus that promotes the concept of government as a facilitator and regulator rather than an implementer of the projects. So, the governments play an important role, and government has a bigger responsibility to play in the IWRM, and they have to act as the promoters of the concept, and they have to facilitate and regulate the IWRM, but its implementation is to be done by the stakeholders, or it is to be done on a participatory basis. Water challenge is to reach mutual agreement about the level at which, in any specific instance, government responsibility should cease or be partnered by autonomous water services management and bodies and community-based organizations. So a line is to be drawn between the responsibilities of the government and the responsibilities partnered by the autonomous water service management bodies and community-based organizations. The concept of integrated water resource management has been accompanied by promotion of river basin as the logical geographical unit for its practical purpose. So already we have said that the IWRM is bounded by an area which is the river basin as the logical geographical unit of all the practical realizations. The river basin offers many advantages for strategic planning, particularly at higher levels of government, though difficulties should not be underestimated. Even though there are some difficulties, but the government at a higher level considers the basin as a geological boundary for the implementation of IWRM. Groundwater aquifers frequently cross catchment boundaries, and more problematically, river basins rarely conform to the existing administrative entities or structures. The problems are that the groundwater may cross the basin boundaries, and also the administrative units may extend beyond the basin boundaries. These are the some problems which may come in the way of IWRM. In order to bring IWRM into effect, institutional arrangements are need to enable. So the institutions arrangements which are existing, they need to enable the following. The functioning of a consortium of stakeholders involved in decision making with, with representation of all sections of society and a good gender balance. So there should be a consortium of the stakeholder organizations which involve the representation of all the society as well as the gender balance. Water resource management based on hydrological boundaries. Organizational structures at basin and sub-basin levels to enable decision making at the lowest appropriate level. So at the bottom level, we should have the decision making organizational structures. Government to coordinate the national management of water resource across the water use sectors. Integrated water resource management should take appropriate account of important environmental sustainability, economic, social and political dimensions. So IWRM need to take into account the environmental sustainability, economic, social and political dimensions. What are the social dimensions? The social dimension points to the equitable use of water resources. See, the social dimension gives importance to the equitable distribution of water resources. Apart from being unevenly distributed in time and space, water is also unevenly distributed among various socio-economic strata of society in both rural and urban settlements. See, we know that water is available or it varies in the availability from both time and space. Both temporal and spatial variations are there, but along with that is it is unevenly distributed among the various socio-economic strata of the society. So economic dimension. The economic dimension draws attention to the efficient use of the water resource and the role of water in overall economic growth. So economic dimension gives importance to the efficient use of the water and its role in the economic growth. Water use efficiency in developing countries is very low in both urban and rural areas. So if you compare with the developing countries, the efficiency in both rural and urban areas is very low. There is a great room for improving the water situation through improved water distribution and management. So what is political dimension? The political empowerment dimension points at granting water stakeholders and citizens at large equal democratic opportunities to influence and monitor political processes and outcomes. At both national and international levels, marginalized citizens such as indigenous people, women, slum dwellers, etc., are rarely recognized as legitimate stakeholders in water related decision making. So far, the societies or the sectors of our societies, that is, women, slum dwellers, are rarely recognized as a legitimate stakeholders in the water related decision making process. Empowering women as well as other socially, economically, and politically weak groups is critical to achieving more focused and effective water management and ensure greater equity. So, if you want to have a effective water management and to ensure the greater equity, we should give or we should empower the women as well as other socially and economically and politically weak groups in the approach of IWRM. Environmental sustainability dimensions. The environmental sustainability dimension shows that improved governance allows for enhanced sustainable use of water resource and ecosystem integrity. Environmental sustainability dimensions shows that improved governance allows for enhanced sustainable use of water resource and ecosystem integrity. So it takes into account to the sustainable use of water resource and the ecosystem integrity. Focus should be given to the linkage between land use and surface and groundwater. Implementing an IWRM process is a question of getting the three pillars right. So we have got three pillars which are to be considered in implementation of an IWRM, moving toward an enabling environment of appropriate policies, strategies, and legislation for sustainable water resource development and management. So we need to have an enabling environment which consists of appropriate policies, strategies, and legislation for implementing the IWRM, putting in place the institutional framework through which the policies, strategies, and legislations can be implemented. So even once we have the strategies, policies, and legislation, we should have the robust institutional framework which can implement these policies and strategies. Setting up management instruments required by the institutional to do their job. Once the institutions are robust, they should have some management tools to implement the strategies and policies. So governments play a key role in the implementation of such IWRM framework. They must also be the main regulator and controllers in the water sector with its associated infrastructure. So government has a role to form the frameworks for implementing IWRM. But water is everybody's business, a resource to be managed at the lowest appropriate level. Since water is required by everyone, so the resource has to be managed at the bottom level or the lowest appropriate level. It is governments working with civil society that must raise awareness of the importance of improved water resource management among policymakers and general public. So it is the duty of the governments to create an awareness regarding the management of policy at the lowest appropriate levels. Dialogues will take place between the many stakeholders involved, including government, civil society, and private sector. Governments can only exercise their responsibilities of good water governance. They involve all relevant national stakeholders in the dialogue when the framework is developed and implemented. So government can exercise the responsibilities of a good governance when it gives an opportunity for all the stakeholders to participate in the framework of the development and implementation of the IWRM. An IWRM approach focuses on three basics and aims at avoiding a fragmented approach of water resource management by considering the following aspects. So, the IWRM approach consists and focuses on the following aspects, that is, enabling environment, roles of institutions, and management instruments. Under enable environment, a proper enabling environment is essential to both ensure the rights and assets of all stakeholders and also to protect public assets such as intrinsic environmental values. And roles of institutional development is critical to the formulation and implementation of IWRM policies and programs. Failure to match responsibilities, authority, and capacities for action are all major source of difficulty with implementing IWRM. Failure to match responsibilities, authority, and capacities for action are all major source of difficulty with implementing IWRM. Management instruments. The management instruments for IWM are the tools and methods that enable and help decision makers to make rational and informed choices between alternative actions. So, the management instruments are to be developed to make to help the decision makers to make rational and informed choices between alternative actions. So the IWRM objectives are economic efficiency, social equity, and environmental sustainability. To have these, we need an enabling environment which develops policies and legislation, and to support this, we need institutional framework at central, local, river basin, and public and private level, and at the same time, we should have management instruments to for the assessment, information and assessment instruments, information instrument and allocation instruments to support the enabling environment. And this leads to a balance of water for livelihood and water as a resource. The following toolbox prepared by the Global Water Partnership can be used as a general guide for the development and implementation of an integrated water resource management, enabling environment consisting of policies, setting goals for water use, protection and conservation, legislative framework, the rules to follow to achieve the policies and goals, financing and incentive structures, allocating financial resources to meet the water needs, then institutional roles, creating an organization framework, institutional capacity building. Then the management institute should consist of the following: water resource assessments, understanding resource and needs, plans for IWRM, combining development options, resource use and human interaction, demand management, social change instruments, conflict resolution, regulatory instruments, economic instruments, information management and exchange. So the management instrument consists of all these supporting instruments. Operationally, IWRM approaches involve applying knowledge from various disciplines as well as the insights from diverse stakeholders to devise and implement efficient, equitable, sustainable solutions to water and development problems. So IWM approach involves applying knowledge from various interdisciplinary streams and insights from the drivers, that is stakeholders. As such, IWRM is a comprehensive participatory planning and implementation tool for managing and developing water resource in a way that balances social and economic needs and ensures protection of ecosystem for future generations. What does many different uses for agriculture, for healthy ecosystems, for people and livelihoods demands coordination action. An IWRM approach is consequently cross-sectorial, aiming to be open, flexible process and bringing all stakeholders to the table to set a policy and make sound balanced decisions in response to specific water challenges faced. So in response to the specific water challenges we are facing, we need to have an IWRM approach which consequently aims at cross-sectorial and open flexible process and to bring all the stakeholders to a common platform to set the policies. Some of the cross-cutting conditions that are also important to consider when implementing IWMR: political will and commitment. So these following are required for implementing successfully an IWRM: political will and commitment, capacity building or capacity development, adequate investment, financial stability, and sustainable cost recovery, monitoring and evaluation. IWRM should be viewed as a process rather than a one-shot approach. So IWRM is not a one-shot approach, or it can happen immediately. It is a long-term and iterative rather than linear in nature. So it is not a linear, but it takes long-term and iterative procedure for implementation as a process which seeks to shift water development and management system from their currently unstable, unsustainable reforms. The art of IWRM lies in selecting, adjusting and applying the right mix of these tools for a given situation. Okay, thank you. We shall conclude.